Welcome everybody to the public portion of the Albany Board of Education meeting on July 9th, essentially what is known as the reorg meeting. So I'm Jeff Honeywell, I'm board counsel. I'll be shepherding the process here only in the early stages. As always, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So those that wish to join in can stand and issue the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to dispense with the normal reading of the mission statement because I don't have it in front of me, so we'll go from there. But what I would like to ask for is a motion for me to act as the chair pro tem for the beginning of this meeting. Can I have a motion? I see Ellen raising her hand.
Aye.
Second by Tabitha. Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion never fails. Okay, motion passes. All right. So we're going to proceed first with the actually one of the nice things I get to do, which is to administer the oath of office to either newly elected or newly re-elected board members. And Hassan is commencing a new term now. So Hassan, if you're ready, if you'll raise your right hand, you don't need to stand, we'll virtually sit there for a moment. And please repeat after me. I, Hassan Al-Manyawi.
I, Hassan Al-Manyawi.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties.
Of the board member of the Board of Education for the Albany City School District.
Of the board member for the Albany City School District.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank
if we
you,
were
sir.
in person, I'd shake your hand.
Thank you, sir.
And a note, Hassan, for you and me and Tanya. We'll have to figure out to get you down to sign the oath, and I will sign that I administered the oath and get that filed. But you're
No
officially
problem.
in. You're officially in.
Thank you, sir.
So the beginning of tonight's meeting is really the purpose of electing officers for the upcoming 2020-2021 school year. A reminder to everyone that the way this goes is I will ask for nominations. A nomination does not require a second, just requires somebody to nominate a person and that person to be willing to accept that nomination. Once all the nominations are in, we'll proceed to a vote in order. And it does require a majority of the 7-person board for any single person to be elected to the office. We'll do president first. And then once that is successfully completed, I will virtually pass the gavel to that person. Ms. Mann, question?
Hi, I'd like to nominate Ann Savage for board president.
Okay. Are there any nominations other than Ms. Savage? Okay, I don't see any. So I'll close the nominations for president and call for a vote. How many in favor of Ann Savage as president for the coming year?
This is always weird.
I think I see everybody's hand up. Now I see Ann's challenge on this. Okay, so congratulations, Ann. And I'm now virtually handing the gavel to you to proceed with vice president and to go from there. So my duties are done.
Thank you, Mr. Honeywell, for your excellent work as pro tem. We appreciate that every year. I would now like to open the nominations for vice president of the board. Do I have a nomination? Ms. Krejci.
I'd like to nominate Vicki Smith, please.
Are there any other nominations? All in favor of Ms. Smith for vice president? That is unanimous. Vicki, you sort of got to raise your own hand. There you go. Thank you and welcome back, Madam Vice President. Now I'd like to open the nominations for secretary of the board. Do I have a nomination for secretary? Dr. Couture.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Tabitha Wilson.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of Ms. Wilson to continue as secretary? That is unanimous again. Thank you all board members for your continued support of the executive team. It's been a very wonderful thing to work with this team, and I am so thrilled to be able to continue for another year. I also want to just take a moment to welcome members of the public who are joining us virtually. This is a new process for us. We've been doing for the last couple of months per the governor's executive order 202.1, allowing us to meet in video conference. We do plan to do that until the executive order expires. And anyone joining from home can access slides and documents at albanyschools.org/BOE. That's also where you find instructions to sign in if you need to send those along to someone else. I will read the mission statement because I think it's incredibly important that we keep focused on it. The mission of the City School District of Albany is to work in partnership with our diverse community to engage every learner in a robust educational program designed to provide the knowledge and skills necessary for success. And now, as this organizing meeting, one thing that we do, which is very different than any other time of the year, is that we each take a moment to talk about the district, board service, our hopes for next year, any other sort of pertinent thoughts. And I'm going to ask Mr. El-Menyawi to have the honor of going first as he was sworn in again tonight. Mr. El-Menyawi.
Thank you, President Savage. I'd like to just begin by thanking the citizens of the City of Albany for electing me to this board position. It's truly an honor, and I will carry this position with the utmost respect and dignity that it deserves. That said, 4 years is quite a lot of time, and I'm looking forward to what is in store. I actually am very optimistic about so many different things that the district has going on right now. I mean, we have a beautiful new high school that's being built with an amazing new art wing, which makes me very excited, and it should make everyone else very excited as well. For the next year, I really just kind of want to focus on infusing any kind of creativity into our children's lives. I think it's so important right now that they have that. And I also want to focus on turning them into advocates for themselves. They've got to learn how to advocate for themselves, and I think this board has done an amazing job doing that so far, and I want to continue that work. Also, I have to thank a few other people. Thanks to the superintendent, her cabinet, the administrators, principals, teachers, staff people of the City School District of Albany. There are so many employees that make this institution run, and for that I am so grateful and thankful. I'm thankful to my board colleagues who are really one of a kind. Thank you so much. And again, to the citizens of Albany and the parents and students of our district. So thank you so much.
Ms. Mann.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. Let me get to my comments here. Okay, great. All right. So I'm Damaris Mann, and my comments are going to be somewhat brief, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to continue my service as a board member on the Albany City for the Albany City School District. You know, it's an honor and a privilege to serve in this capacity. We have had an incredible year. No one would have imagined this time last year that teachers would have spent the last several months teaching from home and students the last several months learning from home. And it was it was amazing to watch the superintendent and her cabinet and our teaching staff work together to make sure that students and families had what they needed in order to make this work. And it really renewed my energy and my commitment to serve in this capacity. And so I look forward to the next year 2020 to 2021 as a year where we will continue to see great opportunity of us working together on behalf of all of the students and families in the district. So thank you.
Board Member Creechy.
This has been certainly the most unique year and certainly one of the most challenging years I've spent on the board. And I just first want to express my gratitude for everyone who is working on behalf of the district, both my fellow board members, our superintendent, as well as the teachers, the staff members, the principals and other administrators that have worked tirelessly with our children throughout the past few months and are now preparing for how we will handle the next school year. We've learned that the schools are not about buildings, they're not about classrooms, but they're about connections between teachers and children, about building connection and that instilling the lifelong learning. However, we are in the process of reinventing the way we deliver that education, and we can't do it alone. Our aid has been cut this year, and we've had to make some very difficult decisions to continue providing the quality programs that our district is very proud of. But we will need more help from the state and more help from the federal government in order for us to really give our kids what they need next year. So I think it's going to be a long year ahead of working hard to keep our kids and our teachers safe, but also giving them the education they need. It's going to be a challenging year ahead, but I'm looking forward to this is an opportunity for us to reinvent education and get to a point where it's working better for the kids for whom it wasn't working before. So I'm looking forward to the challenges of this year and really going to new directions. Thank you.
Dr. Chatoor.
I can't believe it's been 3 years that I've been on the board. This is my 4th year. When I started, first and foremost, thanks to everybody for keeping that trust and giving me that responsibility. And as my colleagues have mentioned, we're all in it together, right? It's all in for Albany, as Mrs. Adams has coined that phrase. It truly means all in for Albany because everybody is involved in taking care of our kids. When I started 3 years ago, we had issues, we had problems. And I wouldn't say that all our problems have disappeared, but we've come a long way. Just look at our graduation. We were around 50%, somewhere around there, 350 students. And now with 632 students, almost 72%, in spite of COVID-19, which we had never expected, right? So the challenges that were thrown to us are enormous, but we've consistently tried to work our way through those obstacles and made progress. So in the last year we had the equity policy that we made. This year we've actually implemented some of the actions based on that policy. We have trained the board and all the staff on culturally relevant education and implicit bias. I learned so much, and this was done before any of the current environment existed. So I think we're in a good place. We are headed in the right direction. The high school phase 1 was finished. Phase 2 is supposed to be finished, this fall. Good things are happening in the district, so I'm very hopeful for this for another year of service and making our district be the example set. I want us to be the Times Union, but for the right reasons. I want us to be looked at as, hey, look at that district, look at all the things that's happening there, and I'm sure that's happening. So thanks again, thanks for the opportunity to be in this position, to be able to say these things with so much joy. We'll get over COVID.
Secretary Wilson.
Thank you. So thank you to my fellow board members. And this time of year, this particular type of meeting allows me to review naturally why I signed up for this to begin with. And of course, I joined with personal goals to increase the public's understanding of our work and increase their two-way engagement, and naturally a focus on student experiences and their success, whether it be college, career, or other social entrepreneurial ventures. And of course, lastly, but not least, to support our district from the level of the superintendent down to where we liaise with the school buildings. So we haven't been able to do that work in the traditional way before. We would naturally go to the school buildings or events and where the parents are, where the students are. The part of the year that was 2020 actually was the shortest part of our school year, but probably the most impactful and full of challenges. But I love the phrase, adversity is the greatest teacher. And within those challenges, there's not only lessons, but opportunity. Arundhati Roy said the pandemic is a portal. And I like that phrase. I even want to say almost has been a bridge, that in our efforts to flatten the curve, we do have to make it feasible for everyone, not merely the people who are privileged to social distance, because that is a luxury many cannot afford. And through our desire to keep everyone safe and reduce exposure, we still at the same time have to stay connected and leave no one behind. And I think in as much as that this pandemic was a bridge, it was also a mirror, because we are what we allow. And that exposed that there's so many loose ends and barriers for us all to be successful. And in this time, of course, we naturally all want to be our personal best. So as a district and community, I think we showed up for each other and within our community and our district. And for what the future holds, I think it's definitely uncertain and not guaranteed. And that makes the urgency of now of the utmost importance. So our personal goals, and my personal goal, will be to continue our work and pursue stretch goals for cultural relevancy in education, continue sitting on the curriculum committee, work to naturally still combat systemic racism, police brutality, and other structures of oppression that disproportionately affect us, and pursue things that basically are the pursuit of sharing our story, not his story. And I want to see how we can incorporate things like, whether it be Black Lives Matter Week, how we can shift from this simple allyship to being accomplices, and also inequity disruptors. So I hope we can look to institutionalize so many things that we had to come up with on the fly in response to COVID, whether it be in response to health and safety, whether it be in response to any food disparities, whether it be in response to the digital divide. And I think we gained a lot of new graduation traditions that I love, such as the lawn signs and parents escorting their students. And lastly, I would say that this budget year inadvertently increased engagements because so many aspects of our program are important to so many people in our community. And I hope that is also institutionalized also. So with that, I just want to say that I'm grateful and thank you all.
Vice President Smith.
Yes, good evening. Wow, I certainly share the sentiments expressed by my colleagues, and I'll do my very best not to duplicate, except in a couple of instances. I first want to express my gratitude and thankfulness to my board colleagues. I came on this board wanting to make sure that we as a board were not part of the problem, that we would be more in the lane of helping to create solutions to the problems. I feel as if I have contributed greatly towards that, and we together have contributed, I think, greatly to that. And I am just immeasurably grateful. I think that I also want to say the work that we've started together around culturally responsiveness and looking at racism, looking at all the things that maybe we personally have, but also that we have privileges of, that we're looking at those things. And it's not easy work. It calls upon a great deal of trust of one another, vulnerability to let yourself kind of be out there. Much of what our teachers have also, and our staff have done, going through implicit bias and culturally responsive education and so forth. And so I just want to express my thanks to the board. I also have to say that I want to express a heartfelt thanks to Superintendent Adams for her stalwart leadership. I, for one, have felt tremendous comfort with her at the helm, particularly during this period of time. I also want to extend thanks to her cabinet, to the school leaders, all teachers, all instructional, non-instructional staff. You all have been so right there for Albany's children and families. And of course, I just have to express just warm regards to parents who've also been without jobs, facing challenges with healthcare, those sorts of things. Just a whole, just managing life in a very, very different way. And my heart goes out to everyone. And I hope that we as a board, as a district, have been there for you. I feel we are certainly attempting to, but we do need to hear your voice to make sure that we continue on that path. I also just want to say that it was very hard thinking about what I wanted to say this evening, but I wanted to share 2 quotes with you. 2 familiar voices to me, and I hope to you. And I'm going to just share some words from 2 Black and gay writers and activists with whom I had the honor of meeting and spending time with in my younger days. That first voice is that of the late James Baldwin, who said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." And I think this period of time in which we find ourselves, that these words ring so true as we bear witness to and live through this experience of the pandemic, as we are dealing with ongoing police brutality and deaths, at the hands of police, and all other kinds of violence and hatred from the top of our government, just is just incredible. And so we have to be together in bringing about the change that we want to see. And I am going to do my very best to work with all of community and all of my board and all of my district folks to make sure we are doing what has to be done to face what is going on. And what is that we have to face? It is racism. I can't call it by any other name. It is racism. And I thought tonight about, I could say, I could say it another way. No, I can't. And I was particularly felt it important to say and speak the words racism and all these related inequities and disparities because there was a youngster who I saw in the news, 6 years old, I think, going to daycare, who had a shirt that read, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. And I really think that is so true, a statement. Until we deal with race, the construct of race in this country, I don't know that we can really deal with all the other isms and disparities that we have going on. It just seems to be race at the root of the problem in America. And I may be wrong, but I think there's strong evidence for that. And we cannot forget this moment in time. So many lives have been lost. And I wish that I could name every single one, but I'll start with Mr. Floyd, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Mr. Arbery, so many before them. But I think living through and in this pandemic moment of isolation and reflection, and also in a culture of hate, again, by the leadership of the president of this country, is just unbearable and horrific. And so we have to face this very issue of racism head on. The second voice that I hear is from the late Audre Lorde. And she says, it's learning how to take our differences and making them strengths that's important. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Now, I used to take that to mean that I couldn't possibly be an activist inside an institution such as the Board of Ed. I've since, maybe it's the age in me that has taken that back. I think some of what this means may be that, but it means that we cannot continue to address these issues, this issue of racism, institutional, systemic racism, in the same blessed ways that we've been doing it. We can't just appease and like, oh, it'll be okay, and try to handle it individually. Well, let me help you with this. No, we have to remove that big barrier, that big hurdle for everyone, or we're not going to make it. So, and I think we have to look at how we do this differently. Some of it, I think, is having the conversations and speaking the truth. Some of it is listening to the voices that are not heard. And I'm very, very proud of this district for really taking the approach of making sure before all of this really that student voice is heard, that parent voice is heard. That is so crucial to moving ourselves to a different level and to arriving at a place of justice. I want to believe that all of those corporations and politicians and institutions that have come out with statements saying, we support Black Lives Matter. Oh, we support this, we support that. We understand the plight of Black and brown people. Okay, so I'm getting a little tired of hearing that. I believe, and I think this is what Black Lives Matter is saying, we now need action. Enough talking already. We know what these barriers are. It's going to call upon us internally and collectively to take the bull by the horn and really work through all the details of what are we doing, how are we continuing to promote these structural problems. And you know what? And the worst part is how it affects and plays or yes, and harms the people who are oppressed, the people who are marginalized. I think about the anger of my family. Yeah, we survived, okay? Some barely, but we survived. Wasn't necessarily all healthy, okay? I want to get to that point where it is healthy. We can live and we can work these things out. We can resolve these things and live with strong mental health, strong social and economic security, and justice, for God's sakes. So education is one of many of the institutions that are going to be faced with this question of racism and how do we deal with these things? How do we address these issues? And I know that it's bigger than us, but we have a huge role in education. And I am employed. I want to listen to and take the bull by the horn again and say, what is it that education, this institution right here in Albany, I can't focus so much on the bigger education. I'll do what I can, but I want to know, what does it mean right here at home in Albany to change the way we do business in terms of educating our youngsters? And that's going to call on all of us to be together and taking on some new tools. So thank you for bearing with me. And I will end it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicki, Vice President Smith. I really appreciate your impassioned remarks, and they are absolutely right on the money. Of course, I echo many of the comments and the sentiments that all of you expressed. It is indeed an honor to serve on this board and with this group of people. As Vicki said so eloquently, the work we are doing as a district to address the systemic racist barriers that exist in our institution and that instantiate racism here is so incredibly important. And I am incredibly proud to be a part of it. I also want to take a moment to emphasize, as several of my colleagues did, that this board has incredible confidence in the entire staff of this district. The teachers and other instructional staff, the support staff, the building leaders and the other administrators, the cabinet, and of course, Superintendent Adams, under whose leadership we are making such tremendous progress. We know that you are doing this work, the work that we have been talking about, that Vicki talked about so eloquently. You did incredible things last year to deal with the requirements of what we're now calling crisis schooling. As a parent, it certainly felt like a crisis. And we know that you are focused on that, on all the things that are in our mission statement and vision statement, on caring relationships, on engaging learning experiences, and on providing equitable opportunities for all of our students to reach their full potential. And that's what that means. That's what the vision statement means. It means all students. I wish I could say that 2020, 2021 will be easier than this past year, but I actually think it's going to be quite a bit harder. There are so many challenges before us and so much uncertainty. In fact, the only thing that is certain is that, like last year, this year is not going to be a normal year. There's going to be many changes throughout the year. We know we are facing an altered school structure as a result of COVID-19. We don't know exactly what that will look like yet, but we know it's coming. We know we are facing real economic distress for many, many members of our community who are going to be impacted both health-wise and economically by this crisis. We know that we as a district are facing meaningful fiscal challenges and that the state is as well. And that's going to mean we have to find new ways to do what our children need. And we're going to need to find new ways to do that with less resources. And of course, we're facing the ever-changing guidance from New York State and a variety of other entities about what should and must be done to ensure the physical and emotional safety of our students and of our staff. These challenges are difficult. And we know that while managing all of that, you are also working to enhance and enrich our academic program for our students next year. Students need so much more. It's part of our commitment to equity and part of our commitment to anti-racism that we give our students what they need to succeed in the world. They need more caring relationships. They need more learning experiences. They need more equitable opportunities. And somehow we're going to need to do that despite the fact that we don't even know yet what school will look like in 2 months. It starts 2 months from yesterday. So I encourage you, superintendent and staff, while you were doing that, all of that incredibly hard work, to make a concerted effort to think about what it feels like to be a parent or a guardian or a student in this uncertain time. Everyone is stretched extremely thin by the demands, the competing demands of work, and by their other obligations, and by the strangeness of the last few months. People, children, and adults are under tremendous stress, both economically and because of their concerns about their health or their actual impact on their health. On top of that, we're living in a political culture where it seems that many institutions that people used to be able to trust, thought they could trust, are not living up to the faith that people have put into them. And we need to be different. We need to do anything and everything possible to break through all that stress, that anxiety, and the information overload that we're all living with, to help families have the information they need when they need it, and the way that they can hear it. But most importantly, we need to help our families feel connected to each other, connected to their teacher, to their school, to the district, and to know in their heart that this institution is doing the right thing for their children and their family, and that their concerns will be heard and addressed and resolved. School year 2021 places before all of the staff of the City School District of Albany an enormously huge task. Nonetheless, I'm still optimistic, as several of my board members have mentioned. I know you are up to the challenge, and I know that the superintendent's leadership is so thoughtful and so methodical, and that she, as she often says, has spent the last several years really building the floor that we need so that we have a firm, strong foundation to now deliver on the promise that we owe our children, all of our children, to give them the resources they need and the skills they need to succeed in the world. And that is how we are going to fight racism for the City School District of Albany. And I appreciate your time. And I hope I didn't go beyond my allotted time. I went a little off my intended remarks there. So thank you all. Now, we can take a little breather. I can say that normally at this time would be the time that we entertain public comment. We always welcome input from our community about the decisions we are making. When we meet in person, people come and speak to us in person. But per our new public comment policy, from now on, both when we meet virtually and when we meet in person, we will be accepting comments by email, phone, and by regular mail. All the contact information for that is available on the district website at albanyschools.org/BOE. Intriguingly, must be summertime because we had no voicemails today and we had no emails today by 4 o'clock. So there was in fact no public comment this time. So we will not get to practice using our new 12:30 policy. So that I do encourage people to comment. We really do appreciate it when we hear from folks. And that brings us now to routine consent. Routine consent is the portion of our agenda where we approve routine matters for the district. These include items like contracts, field trips, personnel matters, and the like. Each board member reviews each item carefully, but we vote on them as a group with no discussion. That allows us to use our meeting time more efficiently. Nonetheless, each board member has the opportunity to set aside any routine consent item in order to require a separate discussion and a separate vote on that item. And with that introduction, I'd now like to entertain a motion to adopt routine consent. Ms. Wilson, seconded by Dr. Chatoor. Are there any set-asides? Ms. Mann.
Hi, I'm going to set aside item 17, Parsons Child and Family Center.
Are there any other set-asides? Seeing none, I would like to have a vote on routine consent. All in favor of routine consent, less the Parsons and Family Child Center. That is unanimous. Sans Ms. Wilson, who has stepped out. So that's 6 with 1 absent. And now can I get a motion for item 17, Parsons Child and Family Center? Dr. Chatoor, second by Ms. Smith. Is there any discussion?
I'm going to abstain from the vote just because I work for the organization.
All in favor of this contract? That is that is 5 yeses. That is Board Member Savage, Smith, Krejci, Chatoor, and El-Menyawi. Ms. Wilson has stepped out, and Ms. Mann abstains. Thank you very much. We are now going to do something we do every year at our annual meeting, and we're going to take all of these things at one time in one great big vote. So everybody should take a quick look at the agenda, and you'll see there are 4 items here. There are our appointments, designations, authorizations, and bonding. And we are going to do one vote to vote for all of the things that are identified on the agenda. These are our routine things that we do each year to establish the structure for the school district for the next year. Do I have a motion to adopt all of the good stuff on item I? Ms. Krejci, seconded by Mr. El-Menyawi. All in favor? And that is unanimous, and Ms. Wilson has returned, so that is 7 votes. And the next item is the Policy Committee, and I'm going to turn the virtual microphone over to Dr.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So what we have today in front of us is an action item. We have to act on 5300, which is the Code of Conduct. As you know, this is an annual policy, gets reviewed every year. And based on our discussions last year at the last meeting, if you remember, the changes to the Code of Conduct were mainly because of the things that happened during COVID-19, where we went to a digital environment for education. So the code now reflects to that schooling classroom as well, and some of the definitions have been modified since the laws have changed, or the terminology has changed. There was public comment last meeting, but there were no public comments that were received. So, any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the Code of Conduct? Ms. Smith, second by Ms. Krejci. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you all.
Excellent. One major sign of progress is that the Code of Conduct adopting is no longer a contentious process, which was not the case 6 years ago. So that's a definitely good sign of progress. The next item on our agenda is the School Naming Committee. There is an action at the beginning of this, and then we will have a presentation. The action is to formally adopt the committee. We discussed this 2 board meetings ago, and we have had several pieces of information about this out in the public. We did get some interest from folks in the members of the public who were interested in serving on the committee, and Mr. Poindexter, acting as chair of the committee that doesn't formally exist yet, put together this group, which I believe is a very balanced effort at trying to ensure that all voices will be heard in this committee. And so I'm really impressed by the skill and thoughtfulness that went into putting the committee itself together. With that, can I entertain a motion to make the committee exist per the resolution and the membership identified. Mr. El-Manyawi, seconded by Ms. Smith. All in favor?
Half of my keys and all.
That is unanimous. And now, Superintendent Adams, I believe there's a presentation.
Well, there's not a presentation, but there is just the sharing of the information. We are so very excited to have this committee so that we can, again, set that foundation, that firm foundation of how we go about naming our facilities and our schools and looking at what our community feels about this. So we are very excited to have this group come together. Their first meeting is this coming Wednesday on the 14th. That is when they are going to meet. And so we are very excited. And I hope I did get that correct, that the 14th is indeed Wednesday or Tuesday.
Okay. Tuesday, I think.
It's Tuesday. So the first meeting is on the 14th, and we look forward to meeting with everyone, establishing, here's how we're going to go about establishing what the process is. I know one of the things that Mr. Poindexter has talked about is the fact that they are looking at what other districts have done so that they can have input with regard to that, looking at other models, and then developing what may be the best thing for us so that they can have a recommendation to the board no later than October 1st. So then our schools can get started, those schools that may be interested can get started in developing their site-based committees. So there will be additional work along the way. And so we're just very excited for Mr. Poindexter and this committee to get started. We think that it's one of the progressive ways that we can look at our equity policy in action. We can look at social justice in action, and we can address some of those barriers that may have created some of those undercurrents of racism in our school district that we may not have recognized before or have not been in a position to address before. So we're really excited about that. And I thank the board for the opportunity to be able to work alongside Mr. Poindexter in this committee. So thank you so very much.
Board colleagues, any questions at this early stage in the process? Members of the community who are listening at home, if any, it is a beautiful night out there. I just want to remind you that this is a sort of a two-phase approach. The first phase is this policy committee that will be developing a policy. The policy has essentially three aspects to it: the criteria for school names, the process to evaluate existing school names to determine if they're consistent with the criteria, and the process to create a process for school-based committees to propose names for new names for schools. Ms. Wilson, you had something you wanted to add?
Less of a question, but just sort of like a statement to underline, which I think it is underscored here, but I wanted to state it out loud that I do know there's, as much as there's a push to move in this direction, there's people who feel hesitation or some regret that we would move in such a direction. And I want them to basically understand that it's not one side winning or one side losing, that it's going to be community driven. So it'll come from the voices of the people who live, work, and will be directly impacted by this for years to come. So it's not something arbitrary, and it's not on a whim, and it's not just because it's popular or trendy to do right now. This is something institutional we're trying to create, and it's going to be community driven. Not that that wasn't established, but I want to reiterate that because I think there's always the counterpoint that people have about historical figures and sentiments about that.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I completely agree, and I do think there's always the opportunity for that. This is something we have talked about off and on in this district since pretty much the minute I got on the board. So we're talking about 6-7 years that we've been talking about this. And I really appreciate something that Board Member Smith has said several times recently, which is that it takes several different things lining up together to cause change to happen.
That's right.
Goodwill and good intent is not always enough. Sometimes you need several other things to line up. And I'm so grateful that finally the rest of the things needed to line up, including strong leadership at the building, strong leadership at the district, and political will have lined up to make this conversation possible. And as you stressed, Ms. Wilson, it is a conversation. And it is a conversation led by the people who are impacted by it most directly. And that, I think, is what we hope to be coming out of the draft policy that the policy committee will be putting together, the naming policy will be putting together, is to give the voice, as Ms. Smith was talking about, strong community voice, strong voice of our students and the folks who are operating in that building. And those buildings, because I'm quite sure there will be more than one. Anybody have any other commentary on that before we move on? Dr. Chittor, I see your hand.
I just wanted to remind people that this is the overarching policy committee that will be bringing up this policy, which will go to the board. And then that sets the stage for things to happen locally in every school building. So there'll be many, many more opportunities for people to get involved at the building level. So make sure you send your names in, show your interest. So when that time happens, we'll have a nice list of, a big pool of people to pick from and get this thing going.
And Mrs. Adams, correct me if I'm wrong, there's also going to be public input opportunities during the policy development, right? Mr. Poindexter anticipates public input opportunities during this first phase as well. Okay.
Absolutely. He has discussed having not only the adult component, but also a student component where for the overall policy, there will be multiple entry points for people to provide input.
Okay. That's terrific. Mr. Aminawi?
I just wanted to put my backing behind Mr. Poindexter. I think he's the right person for the position to work on this, lead this committee. And I have a lot of faith in him and the people that have been appointed to this committee to make decisions that are in the best interest for our citizens and our students for years to come. So kudos.
Ms. Smith, I saw your hand.
Yes, and I think while this may be, down the road in some related point, well, it's relevant. I've heard many people say, oh, well, what about, the history of, Schuyler and, and the history of these slave owners and the good things that they've done. Okay, and I don't know that anyone that I've spoken with is saying, oh, it's time to wipe them away, but rather it's an opportunity to tell the whole story, to provide the entire, history of what did this person contribute, good, bad, and different. How did that impact the lives of the Albany community, of Black and Brown people? And that is something I think that, again, comes up at some other point in time, but I just want to, for folks to also be mindful, this is not necessarily talking about wiping away history, at least that's not my goal, but it's trying to get that truth out there and also to empower folks. The impact of this, of what has happened to Black and Brown and oppressed peoples is so significant that we have to now make sure that we know a complete history and to use that and to empower ourselves.
Anyone else for a final comment before we move on to, I know, an issue that is close to all of our hearts? Okay, that is the end of our action agenda. We do not anticipate taking any other actions tonight. It does happen that we take an action after this point in the agenda, but we have for many years front-loaded all of the actions into the beginning of our agenda so that folks who couldn't stay to the end would be able to be aware of all the actions. So we're now moving to the area of our agenda we call the discussion topics. And the first and most important topic is the discussion, the 2020-21 reopening discussion. And I want to assure people who are tuning in just for this, we don't have any final answers and we will not have any final answers tonight. So don't worry, you haven't missed anything. This is just part of the process.
So thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I also have to say thank you very much to our cabinet, where we are chairing different committees and different facets of this work. This reopening discussion is a huge discussion, and I'll just start with this information is absolutely subject to change because these are just the beginning thoughts. Again, no decisions have been made with regard to what our reopening will be. I will go ahead and navigate through the presentation, and then when it comes time for questions and answers, I will definitely defer to the particular cabinet member who has been chairing that particular committee to answer at a more detailed level if there are questions in that area. So as we get started, our guiding principles, one of the things that we have tried to ensure that as we do this work with reopening, we have to make sure that we are keeping our vision and our mission and our goals in mind, because we are an educational institution. And so regardless of the setting, regardless of any models that we may use, regardless of any equipment, materials, or for example, security, or even just what do we need to do with screening students, et cetera, we have to stay focused on our vision, our mission, and our goals. And so this is at the forefront of all of our decision making. And the purpose of this particular presentation, which will become an update as we move forward from tonight, the reopening discussion will continue at each board meeting, is to just provide the board with updates on the planning process, the status of reopening our schools in September, or October, November, December, whatever the decision may be. But we are going to be optimistic with what does it look like in terms of reopening in September. And so this is the purpose of what we are looking to do. So I'll start with the one of our first subcommittees, which is the elementary school level. And so making sure that here are some of the things that we have been talking about. I'll start with the commentary of we do not have any specific guidelines with regard to a number of students that will be permitted into the classrooms. However, we know that at the core of it, we will be looking at social distancing. With regard to the social distancing, we know that we may be able to fit approximately 10 to 12 students in a classroom at the elementary level. And it changes at each level. And one of the things that we've looked at is whether we have all of the cabinetry, the furniture things that are in the room, like we have carpets, squares out on the floor. If those things are removed, would we be able to have a higher number of students in the classrooms with social distancing? And so what we're looking at right now is what would that verified space be if we were to keep some of the furniture in the room and only remove those things that are roughly like in the center of the room, et cetera? What might that look like? The discussion at the elementary level also looks at the total number of students. It also looks at the capacity of the buildings, looking at the options of perhaps using several buildings for elementary students if the assumption is that all elementary school students will be in school each day. If that is the assumption, then we know that based on 10 to 12 students in a class space or a learning space, we may need to use additional buildings. And so what you see here would be what it would look like with having pre-K through third grade in our elementary buildings, 4th through 5th grade at O'Neill, Myers, and Tony Clement. Also looking at the fact that 4 of our schools may be able to keep pre-K through 5 in their buildings, but we also know that one of the challenges is going to be transportation. So another piece is looking at supervision and how we use our core, encore reading teachers, ENL speech and teaching assistants in various supervisory roles as we break down that number of students in a particular classroom. And then the use of our instructional support, for example, our coaches, social workers, school psychologists, et cetera. In addition to their secondary staff that we may be able to use at the elementary level to assist with supervision. So those are some of the things that we have looked at. The other piece that we have looked at moving forward, determining our recommendation for the structure of the day. Some of the classes may be split in half when we look at, for example, if there are 10 to 12 students in the class, all 24 students may come to school, but 12 would be in one room and 12 would be in another room. This is another option that we've talked about. Self-contained students in pre-K classes remaining whole during due to the size and the staff, because as you know, with our students with disabilities, those classrooms, depending on what program it is for self-contained, that program is maybe 10 students, 15 students, 14 students, 12 students, depending on the particular program. Classroom teachers may provide a half day of instruction to each group, and then another supervising adult would be responsible for the other half. Encore teachers would rotate through, because we know that teachers would still have to have prep periods, etc. So we have to look at those components of the instructional day. Reading, ENL, and speech teachers may be assigned supervision rotations that allow them to provide some of the required services, and it may be a different grade level each week, but those are things that we are still ironing out. I'm going to take a pause right now just to give you the big picture, because one thing that I've not provided you with is that comprehensive list of the committee members, so that you understand on each of our committees, we have teacher representation, administrative representation, support staff representation, there's cabinet representation, our unions are represented. So it's a pretty robust committee structure, and we will provide you with the names of everyone that's on the committee as we start moving through this process. We will definitely provide that to you so that you can see that district involvement. And then as we move forward with our forums that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation, when we talk about the forums, we'll have a list of those parents and students that served on various panels, etc., so that you have that particular information. The other piece at the elementary level that's been discussed is the flipped classroom concept, where we look at prioritizing what instruction has to occur with the classroom teacher, what can be done with the supervising adult, if it's reinforcement, enrichment, etc., what does that look like? Looking at the use of Google Classroom and Nearpod, which we did provide information to the board about Nearpod, and we've had quite a positive response from our teachers with regard to the use of Nearpod. So we're looking at using that and continuing with that in our virtual learning environment. Looking at teachers being assigned to virtual responsibilities for those students who are unable to return to school for whatever reason. We do foresee that there may be an option, because part of the survey that we're going to send out, which I will discuss in a little bit, will address what a choice might be for parents, so that we can have an idea of how many parents would be interested in having their students come to school, because we know that there have been some challenges and some concerns from our parents with regard to health and safety, and looking at how many may want to opt for a virtual environment. So those are things that we're going to be looking at. And then, of course, looking at staggered arrival and dismissal in order to cover the preps for our teachers and student screenings. At the middle school level, one of the considerations is a blended learning model. And you can see where we would look at Hackett and North Albany to be used as to rotate students for on-site instruction. North Albany would support students from O'Neill, AIC, North Albany, Giffen, and Toast. And Hackett would support students from Hackett, Myers, Ash, and Eagle Point. We have assessed the classrooms at the middle school level, and based on the CDC guidelines and the 6 feet social distancing, we're looking at approximately 12 students in a classroom. And that is, that's still looking at furniture and everything being in the room. We may be able to have maybe 14 students. We may gain space for about 2 more students if we move some of the furniture that is not mounted to the walls, etc. If we move some of those things, we may gain space for 2 students, maybe 3. But right now, we know that we're going to be able to average about 12 students at a time with social distancing. Possible rotation schedule for on-site learning. looking at our self-contained special education students attending every day, general education students in grades 6, 8, looking at 2 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. Co-taught resource room, English language learners, tier 3 students for math and attending reading. They attend 3 days, and then also use Fridays for related services if needed, and also exploring the possibility of Friday instruction for instrumental music lessons. So all of these things are being considered as we move through this process. With regard to time frame, there are 3 different time frames that we have sample considerations: a 40-minute period, 50-minute period, and a 90-minute block schedule. 1 way in the building, 1 way out of the building, so that we can ensure that we are screening students properly. Also within the building structure, part of the guidance that has come out from Department of Health and CDC is the use of 1-way hallways, much like what you see in the grocery store, where you have 1-way traffic down the aisles. So what does that look like? We have not plotted that out yet. But we do know that that would have to be a consideration if that comes forward. A shortened school day, which would allow for contractual obligations such as common planning time, and but it doesn't reduce the instructional time for our students. And I do want to say a little bit about the common planning time. It is more critical than ever that our teachers have the opportunity to plan instruction differently. And so we are really looking at what that looks like. Because again, we provided training for teachers and planning opportunities for teachers that, if you remember, when we went into the school closure. However, we were building the ship and sailing it at the same time. And so many times we were definitely looking at quality training for our teachers. But one of the things that we've heard from them is they were in the moment of training. And so now you need that time to digest and peel back and see what are some of the best practices that we learned so that we can enhance our craft. And so we want to make sure that we absolutely spend time being very thoughtful about what that common planning time would look like. At the high school level, we are exploring a continuum of options that have flexibility, looking at cohorts of students, 12 to 15 students, based on social distancing guidelines. At the high school, in an average classroom where there are no loose furniture items, everything is mounted to the perimeter or against the perimeter, we are looking at approximately 18 spaces that we could get at the high school level with social distancing. So the distance learning model is something that we are looking at, making sure that we prioritize on-site teaching. What are some of the things that we need to do with regard to hands-on courses, CTE, our on-site labs? All of those things are things that may be challenging, but it's not something that we cannot do. We're just looking at what are some of the models around the country of what people are doing, what other districts are doing to address that hands-on component of education, which we know is so very critical. Exploring the wraparound services on campus, and what would an adjusted schedule look like, approximately 3 to 4 hours on campus each week. Would students be in, if we had a cohort of students, would they be aligned with their core courses? What might an advisory period look like for all of our students? The opportunity for specialty lessons, tutoring, social emotional support, grouping students 9 through 10 based on the core courses and 11 through 12 based on their specialty courses. And again, these are all conversations that were happening so that we can look at individual schedules as well, just to see what the trends are with regard to this flexibility. I'm going to take a pause just to give some highlights. Our elementary school planning committee is chaired by Dr. Wilson Turner. Our middle level planning committee is chaired by Ms. Lori McKenna. And the high school planning committee is chaired by Mrs. Karen Bechtel. And so I do thank them for the work that they've done in pulling all of this together to get this whole thought process down and documented and work through some of the details so that when we start having those conversations with the forums, we're not going with a blank slate. We have something to start that thought process of our community so that they understand what some of those challenges may be as to why and how this has come about. Transportation, I thank Mr. Lesko for the patience and the time that he devotes to this, along with our brand new director. Nothing like having a brand new director, Mr. So, who deals with not only learning the role here in this district, but going through COVID-19 and now having to experience what might it look like in such a non-traditional way. And so I think they make a great team, and I do give kudos to our transportation department just for the work that they've been able to do in communicating with our first student company as well as with CDTA. That collaboration is unmatched. And so we're very happy to have that. So what you can see here is that with First Student, we're looking at our elementary students and our special needs students, and a large bus, which typically houses about 48 to 71 students based on the social distancing and seating a student every other seat, not even one student in each seat, reduces us to 11 students on a very large bus. So right there, you can see that transportation is a challenge. And so we are working through that and looking at what that might be. I will add to this that this does take into account that this is a point of contact. This is an initial point of contact. So there would need to be screening and temperature checks of students coming on the bus. So there would have to be an adult on the bus, which takes a space. Without the adult doing the screening, we would be able to have 12 students on the bus. However, we do have to have an adult there to do the temperature check and the screening. One of the things that I think is important to note that siblings and children in the same home would be allowed to sit together. So there could be 2 students in one seat, but still another seat, skipping a seat, then there would be another student. So we don't have those exact numbers because we haven't done those exact routes, but that just kind of gives you an idea of, we would be working with 11 students minimum on each of our large buses. The small buses would be able to house 4 students plus the 1 bus aide, and the regular capacity on a small bus is 30. So you can see just with those numbers, with the small bus and the large bus, you can see that there are some challenges with regard to transportation that we would need to work through. Wheelchair bus, 1 student, regular capacity, 2 to 3 students. And so each of our wheelchair buses would only be able to have 1 student. CDTA for our secondary students, which would be our middle school and our high school students. A tripper bus, which is the direct line to the schools. Regular capacity is roughly 60 students. It would be reduced to 15 to 20 students. And then a regular bus, total passengers, 10 to 15, where the regular capacity is 60. So now the difference with the regular bus and the tripper bus would be our students only. The regular bus, and I say only, meaning predominantly, and then the regular bus would be the regular route, which would include people waiting at the bus stop to get on the bus. So there would be a 10 to 15 total passenger limit on the bus. So as you can see, transportation is going to be very busy as they work through some of the challenges. We don't know if it means more buses. We don't know if we would be able to have more drivers. Those are things that are unknown. The same thing with CDTA. We do not know those answers at this time. Maintenance and operations, working under the leadership of our Deputy Superintendent, Kimberly Roaring. These items for equipment and supplies have been procured. We are either awaiting the delivery or we have them already here. We are looking at a screening app, and so we have a two-part piece, and I do thank you to Lori McKenna and Kent Baker. We have an in-house screening app that we are using temporarily as we move to another app, and also looking at a door device. And I'll explain the door device. The door device is something that it is done by our lock company, where it can take your temperature as you walk to the door. It can take your temperature and have kind of a screening that way, because that's part of what we have to do with regard to the screening of our employees. We do have touchless thermometers. We have ordered our face shields. We have disposable masks, and we are in the queue for renewing those orders. Disposable gloves, we have those. The polycarbonate panels, this is what you see, not exactly the same material, but this is the material that we can use. But if you've been to the store lately, you'll see that in front of the cashier, there's the plastic stand in front of them that creates that distance. That's what these polycarbonate panels are. We are looking at installing them for our reception area at our business offices, and then looking at the face shields and perhaps the polycarbonate panels that are they are isolated panels, or individual panels, that's better. The individual panels that you could put in front of you, not only for students, but in various areas throughout the school building where we might need those. Hand sanitizer, we are well stocked with hand sanitizer. We have used the free hand sanitizer from the governor's office that we have been able to secure. We do have additional misters that we have been able to provide one in each of our schools. So that helps us with the sanitization time. We have ordered Porta Scrubs machines for each building, which we have small ones and larger ones, which can be used in the restrooms, but the smaller ones can assist us with getting through the desks in the classrooms. And then we have additional bathroom disinfecting machines that help us to deep clean and disinfect our restrooms. Our next steps, we are updating our maintenance and operations procedures manual with our new cleaning and disinfecting requirements. We are looking at space efficiencies with our 6 feet of social distancing, and developing a process by which we would need to go through and tape off the areas in a classroom, which would be 6 feet apart. So those are things that we would be working on in our maintenance and operations department. Our reopening forums have been scheduled. Our link is available for questions, and the information has gone out today just before the board meeting. We have pushed this out to our community. So these are the dates. Elementary would be Tuesday, July 21st, high school Wednesday, July 22nd, and middle school Tuesday, July 28th. We're looking at a student forum at 4 o'clock on each of those days, and then parent community forum at 6 p.m. Based on the feedback that we get, we will look to see if there are other forums that we need to hold. As you know, the date of the 28th is very close to the 31st, and I'll go to the next slide, is very close to the 31st when our plans are due to state ed, but that doesn't mean that once we have information from the governor's office that we won't be able to make adjustments to our plan. And so you see the timeline for the reopening plan. As a member of the committee for reimagining, we are well on our way to having that guidance provided. And by the 13th, we have been working very quickly with looking at different areas of breaking it down into subcommittees that look at family engagement, looking at social distancing in an educational setting, looking at mental health, looking at our residential areas. So what does it look like in terms of health and safety and transportation? And so all of that information is being compiled, and we do anticipate that we will meet that deadline of July 13th. On the 31st, we will have our plan ready for the for state ed. And then we will await the decision from the governor from August 1st through the 7th, and then we'll be ready to make any tweaks to our plan as needed. So at this time, I open the floor for questions that you may have, and then I will invite the rest of our team to join in.
So, board colleague, this is the first time any of us are seeing this information. There's a tremendous amount of information here, and of course, it's all very preliminary. And we have committees full of very smart people who are thinking through all of the implications of this. And we're not going to tonight try to reproduce either the work of the committees or the work that will be done in the forums. Otherwise, we'd need 12 hours for the board meeting, which I know we don't want to spend here. So I am going to propose, if you are willing, to suggest that we each ask 2 questions, 2 rounds, 1 round. Each person asks 1 question, as we always have, and then we'll do a second round for a second question, and then we just call time on this section of the agenda. Can I just see some nodding? Is everybody comfortable with that as a process? Okay, and then because I know everybody has questions, I think I would like to just do it in the same order we did the statements in. That way I don't have to worry about who's had one turn, who's had another turn. Mr. El-Manyawi, that would put you first. Are you comfortable with that? Would you be willing to go first?
Sure, that's fine. So my first question is regarding larger spaces like the gym or the cafeteria. Are we allowed to use these spaces to teach classes, or would it not be wise to use them because of the echoes, or are we looking at those spaces?
Depending on the course that is being taught, we can absolutely use those spaces. However, it does place some restrictions on the physical education program and how that may be delivered. And I will ask that Dr. Wilson-Turner, Ms. McKenna, or Mrs. Bechtel, if you all have something to add with regard to your various levels.
At the elementary level, we are strongly considering using our gym, our cafeteria spaces, any large space that we can to reduce the possibility that students have to be relocated in grades 4 and 5. So you see in this initial thinking, there are certain schools that have already figured out ways to keep their entire pre-K through 5 in the building, and that is through using those spaces. Principals have until tomorrow to figure out what possible space configuration they could come up with that would allow them to keep more students there. Because as Mrs. Adams said, transportation is already going to be strained. If we add this component of transition for our students and the transportation challenge, we know we'll have an increased hardship. So we're trying to do as much as we can to use that, and have had some conversations with maintenance and operation about what are we allowed to erect to create some spaces that are more conducive to learning so that we can keep as many students in the elementary schools as possible.
Board Member Mann.
I just wanted to add, at the middle level, we are not planning on using the cafeteria or the gymnasium for instructional spaces. The only common area that we are considering using for instructional spaces at Hackett only is the stage area of the auditorium.
And the high school is not considering those spaces for instruction.
Sorry, Lori and Karen.
And let me clarify what that means. That means for classroom instruction, like an English class being held in the gym. That's what that means when we say not using it for instruction, okay?
We understand. There's always instruction happening in physical education. Ms. Chappell knows where I live, and I would not like to hear what she has to say about that. Board Member Mann.
Sorry. So this is more of a comment. As we're, maybe a question too. So as we're looking, so the governor's going to make his decision. we're putting out these recommendations. The reality is we may have some parents that don't wish to have their children return to school, even if we have a reopening plan. And then we may have kids who may have a temperature, we have to turn them away and we can't reach their parents. And so I'm not going to get into the weeds, but there's a lot of, I know there's going to be a lot of discussion, right? And, and I worry about our students and our families who are without a lot of resources. I worry about if their kid gets turned away because they have a temperature. I worry about, child welfare involvement, like this unintended consequence, so it's just a statement. There's all of these different variables that come up. And I trust, Superintendent Adams, I trust you and your cabinet and I appreciate this entire presentation, but it's going to be quite interesting. And I also would want to say to our parents who are listening to just do our best to be patient, because I know a lot of parents are like trying to figure out what they're going to do in September, and we're not going to know until the governor speaks in August. So it doesn't give a lot of time.
One of the things that I will add to that is we face some very similar things with our ESY program with regard to students who have to ride the bus. And one of the things that we had to put in place was that a parent has to bring the child to the bus stop. We cannot have students unaccompanied. Now, what does that mean in the larger picture? We don't know. There's a big question mark there. We don't know that, because that is also, as it has already, it will impact work schedules. It will impact a bigger picture. There is a ripple effect. And so respectfully, we do not have those answers as to what that's going to be. And so I wouldn't even want to venture tonight to even propose what some solutions may be, because we don't have them. But I do know, I can say that it is absolutely one of the things that we are concerned about in terms of that initial point of contact. If a student cannot come to school, then what?
Exactly.
And so right now, it's just that. It is a question, because we have to look at that very carefully and see what those steps are going to be.
Board Member Krejci.
I wanted to start by saying I really thank everyone for the effort they put into this. This is very detailed and gave me a really good idea of what you have in mind for the school year. And it was really helpful for me to really get my head around this. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, because I know questions about testing and sick kids and how long out of school and how substitutes would work. I can appreciate that those are questions for another day, but because you have touched on some very specific maintenance and operation issues, I'm wondering, in light of the governor's recent focus on HVAC systems and making sure that HVAC systems in buildings have appropriate HEPA type filters with a MERV 13 rated, high air quality. Do we know if our air filtration and HVAC systems in each of our buildings is up to that standard? Or if not, can we get it there before September?
I'm so very glad that you asked that question, because that's one of the questions when that information first came out. Ms. Roaring and I had that conversation, and I know that she's been following up. So I will turn that time over to Ms. Roaring.
Good evening. I'm happy to respond to that question. We actually have been doing some research on what we are using in our buildings at this time, and we know that our buildings, because we're subject to SED regulations, already require us to work in that domain. So we do have those very high quality, high filtering HEPA type filters in our systems. We also are managing our fresh air intakes that are minimally in compliance with SED, but oftentimes higher than what they require us to do in terms of circling that fresh air through the building and turning that building over, if you will, in a more compressed period than what may traditionally happen in other settings.
Great, thank you very much for the answer.
Board Member Chatoor.
Yeah, like I said last time, it's probably easier to send man to Mars or Moon than figure this thing out. So I don't want to get into the weeds because we're so early on in the game, but it's reassuring to see that these things are being thought about. My question was going to be, it was more like things to remember when we do transportation, since the elementary schools, not all of them are going to have pre-K through 5 in their buildings. So there will be kids who would normally walk to their school because they are within that close distance. Now would we have to take a bus? So there'll be some new challenges, which I mean they would have never taken a bus before. So or use the app to track their child, or so there'll be those things to think about. But again, this is so early. I just want to tell that just make sure to note it down somewhere that these need to be created, and as much information that we can provide to the parents, it makes it it makes everybody a little calmer and patient to work with this unique situation. Thank you.
Secretary Wilson.
Thank you. I know that it's too soon to pursue an answer to this, so I just wanted to ask if the committee has. My questions actually felt a lot like Damaris's, but I was curious if the committee has gotten around to reimagining attendance, and I asked because naturally we have gone digital in many capacities, so I'm wondering, it's probably way far too early, but I wonder if there's any discussion around that, and whether there's, in lieu of going to school in person, could you log in and still make up work and things of that nature?
So that's one of the things that is, so for us, in our thinking, absolutely. We would like to count the attendance that way. We want to make sure that we are acknowledging that our students are present, be it digital or in person. The things that we have to wait on are those guidelines from SED, that if there's going to be any type of seat time waivers or anything like that, we're still awaiting either the continuance of that. We know that the 180-day rule will have to be waived if we have any type of hybrid or delay or, whatever the case may be. So there's two answers to that. As a district, absolutely, we would look to count students present when they are in class, be it virtually or in person. But we do know that there are other guidelines that we have to follow, and so we're awaiting that guidance from the state, from State Ed.
Board Member Smith.
Great. Superintendent, you have answered my questions. They were related to Ms. Mann's and Ms. Krejci's and also Ms. Wilson's. But, and I assume, this is just a comment, that there's going to be some sort of, manual and communications for parents. And I think you had indicated that at some time ago. I think I might have asked that question.
That is correct. We will have a form, just like we have our document that we posted with regard to continuity of instruction for the COVID closure. We will have a complete document that we will prepare. We will, of course, we will divide it out so that it's easily digestible, because as you can see, for each of these categories that you see here today, you could probably have 20 pages for each category. And so we want to make sure that we are doing it in a very thoughtful manner with our community. So yes, at the end of the day, there will be a complete document that summarizes everything that we are doing and what we are looking to do with regard to the reopening.
That's great. Thank you. And really appreciate the work on this and the detail from everyone. Thank you.
I want to second that appreciation of the detail. Tonight's presentation was much more detailed than I had anticipated. I had really expected it to be more of a process presentation, so I'm thrilled to be a little farther in my own understanding than I expected to be tonight. I think that it will be very helpful for community members as they go into those July workshops and forums to have something to ground themselves in. I'm going to stay very far out of the weeds and very high up in the board level, which is, do you anticipate as part of this planning process constructing a financial model for how this is all going to impact us? In particular, I'm thinking about transportation and I'm thinking about sub-costs. I'm anticipating a child who gets tests positive, right? They were asymptomatic at the beginning of the day. by the end of the day, they're symptomatic and they have a positive test. They've interacted with 5 or 6 or 10 adults across the course of the day. Now we have 10 people who need to be quarantined for 10 to 14 days, depending on what the regulation is. That's 10 subs we now need to pay. I'm just interested in the financial modeling about anything and everything, but particularly transportation, maintenance, and subs, which seem to me like real potential budget breakers. And if we can't afford to maintain and sustain it, we can't afford to do it. And so that's really my big picture question.
So yes, we are looking at how we are tracking anything that adds to the cost. As we are now, what are those COVID-19 specific costs? We are tracking those, but in this model, whatever model we settle in on, we have to develop a structure to stay within our budget, and then to look at what are those things that are causing us to either exceed or, have to make other decisions with regard to what, because we have a finite dollar amount. So then what is the give to get? We will be looking at that roughly on a weekly basis, because we'll need to know that impact.
Exactly. I mean, we really need to make some guesses, hypotheses, estimates of what the real costs are going to be, right? That sub cost is such a wild card to me. And we've always had a sub shortage. So it's not just about the money, it's about whether we even could fill the subs. And again, I know parents want certainty, but there's no real certainty here. Even if we have a plan, and even if we have a plan on the first day of school, if we have a spike and we get a couple of kids and we can't staff buildings, well, that's a big problem. Have kids in school with those. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to follow up. Mr. Elmanyawi, you're next.
I initially had in the weeds question about transportation, but I think I'll zoom out a little bit and ask whether the school district is able to provide thermometers, maybe even basic thermometers. So there's kind of a catching this before the student gets onto a bus, before the student gets into school or class, because a lot of our families will not have thermometers, and if we can somehow provide them even basic ones, that might be very useful in preventing somebody who's positive from getting it.
We can look into that. We can definitely look into that.
Board member Mann.
Did you see my head gesturing?
Oh no, you're next, Doctor.
Yeah, I actually I don't have any more comments. We're very early in the process, and I don't have any questions.
Oh, do you have a question?
Yes, I had a second question, and it's to some extent it's a more general one about staffing, which is you mentioned having conversations with parents, but I'm wondering what conversations you've had with staff, because I'm imagining at least some of them may have pre-existing health conditions or family health conditions where they aren't able to be in the classrooms next year. And my next question just was specifically about elementary school. It says that staff, including social workers, school psychologists, and behavior specialists may also be needed for supervision. And my question is, if they're supervising a small class of 12 kids for half the day, how are they able to also provide the social work, psychology, and behavior services? That's their main function, because I know the kids are really have gone through a particularly traumatic experience the past few months. And I imagine that they'll need to work with a lot of kids. I'm not sure how that's possible if they're supervising in classrooms.
Okay, so I'll start with the staff piece, and then I think Dr. Wilson-Turner and I can tag team on the elementary supervision piece. So for the staffing piece, one of the things that we are going to do, we will have a staff survey that goes out to gather some of that information. We have been working with the union to get, just high level talk about these may be possibilities. So yes, we do know that we do need to hear from our staff. So just to kind of frame where we are, we have had the thought exchange, which was done at the CAP region level, where many of our staff and parents and community members were able to participate in that. We've also done a survey in-house through Ms. Bechtel's office that we have received input. We have representation on each of the committees, different representation of teachers, support staff, and administrators throughout each of those committees. And then we will also have an additional survey that goes out to our staff, and we'll have some focus groups there as well. So there will be opportunities to gather that information so that we can then make some decisions based on the information that we get. With regard to the supervision piece with our social workers, school psychologists, et cetera, that's a piece that looks at scheduling. And so I will turn this over to Dr. Wilson-Turner and also Ms. McKenna and Ms. Bechtel if they have anything to add.
So one of the most challenging pieces of the elementary model is if by splitting children in half, I have to magically come up with twice as much staff than we would have had in the past. And so what we tried to do is prioritize which staff we would try to use for supervision first. And of course, we want to use those staff persons who are traditionally in that role, our reading teachers, our encore specialists, et cetera. Even pulling a speech therapist who has required services that she is supposed or he is supposed to provide would be a challenge. And so in looking at the model, my 4 principals are on their 3rd model of pairings of how we do supervision and how we rotate staff through in a way that utilizes the most effective staff to provide that supervision, and to think through if the reading teacher is providing supervision to a classroom, how does she provide that service to all the other students she would have provided that service to if she was in her traditional role, and how does she do that while supervising instruction? And so those are some of the considerations the team is having. But you'll notice that the behavior specialist, the social worker, school psychologist are really the round or tier 2 staff that we would need to go to try to accomplish supervision. And so our first order of business is to fit all the students into the classroom space. If we potentially could keep some classrooms whole because the space that we're using is so large and we can space children 6 feet apart, that could potentially reduce the supervision needs that we have. And I have made it very clear to my other committee members that I am looking to take any secondary staff that will not be needed because of the reduced amount of time that the secondary students will be on site. And so anyone that is allowed to come down to the elementary level to participate in supervision will be utilized as such that we can maintain as much of our programmatic and legal requirements as humanly possible.
Ms. Wilson, do you have a second?
May I?
Sorry.
I had a quick, I have a 2-second follow-up question to that, if it's okay?
Sure.
It's just, so on the slide when it says that the reading, ENL, and speech teachers will be assigned supervision rotations that allow them to provide required services to a different grade level each week, does that mean that while they're doing the small group supervision, they're also pushing in to provide their services? Is that the idea? Just want to confirm that.
So the idea is that if I'm an ENL teacher, I'm with an ENL segment of the population, maybe at 1st grade for that week. So I'm able to provide them with live instruction, but my other grade levels will receive some form of virtual instruction. So they're still getting their required instruction at the same time. And so we've discussed many models, whether that's an actual live stream, if there's so that they're seeing what the ENL teacher is doing with that group of students right then and there, or if there's something that is more asynchronous that happens during that period of time. So a lot of thought going into what instruction actually looks like while there are 12 other people in the classroom who may be doing something different, or 6 other students in the classroom may be doing something different.
Again, I know. Oh yeah, sorry. I was just saying, I know I can't pursue an answer to this, but I was curious if also the committee has looked at what would typically be group activities like recess, and also I know it came up at my job, so I'm curious if it came up in the committee about what actually will transpire when students have to go to the restroom, if there'll be other procedures and things like that.
So yes, those common areas, those larger spaces, that's really, I would say, just as we have done our phases with, going back to our quote new norm, phase 1, phase 2. That would be part of the phase 2 or phase 3 discussion as we move forward, because we first want to make sure that we are looking at that instructional delivery, because we want to make sure that we have a hold on that, and then everything else will come from that role. We need from that model, because if that means eating lunch in the classroom, eating lunch in the cafeteria, but having different sections for kids to eat in, all of those things will be, quote, secondary to whatever happens instructionally. And so we're just taking it in pieces as we build out from the core of what we need to do, which is deliver instruction.
Ms. Smith, did you have a second question?
I didn't, but well, I do now. It's just a little clarification. Dr. Wilson Turner, when you said a moment ago that some of the secondary teachers would be able to come down to the, okay.
So secondary staff, it should say. It should be
secondary support staff. It's support staff. I think hall monitors, TAs.
Okay, because I apologize. I thought I heard when you said the word allowed, then I was like, are you mean allowed in terms of certification or some other thing?
But I do. So anyone who is K-12 certified and can work anywhere in our system should be up for consideration for supervision.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you.
But since I asked a really big picture question for my first question, I'm going to ask a little weedy question for my second question. On average, figuring it comes out okay. The bit of a weedy question is class changes. It seems like at the secondary level, you're still envisioning people being in their traditional schedule or some modified 40-minute, 50-minute, 90-minute version of their schedule, which anticipates them changing classes, which anticipates a lot of kids in the hall. And I'm just trying to understand how that might look.
So class changes are discouraged. And so it may mean that teachers move to different classrooms versus students moving, but we still have to hold that in the back of our minds because we aren't sure if that's going to be a possibility or not.
So can you just describe, and maybe if the answer is we don't know, that's a perfectly legitimate answer at this stage in the process, but if the kids are staying together at the secondary level where every kid's schedule is unique and different, how does that actually happen? Or are we talking about radically reducing the number of offerings so that more kids are able? So you can get a group of 20.
One of the possibilities, and so you have to kind of think very much so out of the box, because it would be the scheduling, I don't want to say nightmare, but it would be in looking at a cohort of students that have so many things that are similar, they are scheduled together. So it could be a possibility, and depending on the course, it could be that the teacher moves from class to class, which is why you notice I'm using all of the disclaimer language in that, no, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we do know that class changes are discouraged because of the movement of kids and that risk of high contamination. So then as we think about that, what are some of those things? When we think about maybe a rotating schedule, and I'm just giving you just a very high level example. If you have rotating schedules where students are in school 1 or 2 days a week, what is it that they're actually taking when they're at school? Is it one of the hands-on classes where, yes, you have your culinary kids here? So yes, they can be there. And then maybe because they're all in culinary, that becomes the advisory period because they're all culinary students. So we have to think very differently about how we organize that cohort with those similiarities so that they may not have to move classes in a traditional sense.
I understand. I'll just echo back what I think I heard you said, which is to utilize the classes offered in person versus those offered virtually to minimize the number of classroom changes that are needed and keep the kids together with kids who have similar schedules. Correct. I understand. I would not like to be the person who wrote the master schedule for that, but I do understand conceptually what you were talking about. Okay, board colleagues, that was 2 questions each. I know that there's so many more questions that we all have, but Nonetheless, we're going to leave this topic and go on to whatever is next, which I believe is the DSIP, if I remember correctly. Yes, the District Comprehensive Improvement Program.
So before we introduce Mrs. Bechtel, I do want to just say thank you so very much to the board for your input tonight. This has been beneficial for us hearing this conversation. And I will say some of the times I have to say to Cabinet, thank you very much for their leadership in working with their committees, because in addition to everything else that is going on, this is also happening as well. And to be where we are at this particular time, knowing where some of our colleagues are across different districts, with this level of thought and detail that we're able to share with you, even before we start having our forum meetings and things like that, I think you can see that there is a lot of thought going into this, because we want to make sure that we're doing what is best for our students. But there's still the flexibility. There's still a lot of flexibility, so that when we get that input, we will be able to take that and make some necessary tweaks and make some decisions as we move forward. So thank you to Cabinet for all that you do, and thank you to the board for the very quality comments that you have provided to us tonight. So thank you very much. And at this time, I would like to have Mrs. Bechtel come forward and talk to us about our District Comprehensive Improvement Plan.
Good evening, Superintendent and Board of Education. I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about one of our annual processes. In the midst of doing reentry and virtual learning and all these new things, we continue to carry on with our regular processes, one of which is the DSIP. So the process, we are required to have a district comprehensive improvement plan because we have schools that are identified as comprehensive or targeted. We have a committee that convenes in the spring. We establish those goals based on our data, and that helps us establish trends. And then we develop those action plans around those goals. So this has been an interesting year because the DSIP template and process, we've had some changes this year, and I am so supportive and happy about these changes. The very first one is that they have moved the template from Excel to Word, which has been lovely. So it's a technical change, but it really has made life a little bit easier. The other piece that is not a technical change, but a substantive change is really this identification of the district priorities. Rather than goals that are grounded in those DTSDE, if you'll remember, that's the diagnostic tool for school and district effectiveness. So that is a new process. And what's interesting about that is the DTSDE is a wonderful comprehensive tool for school improvement. But sometimes it would tie us down in terms of identifying our district priorities. I might talk more about that a little bit more. But a second change is, or a third change, I should say, is that we established district chairs for each of the 5 priorities identified. And then they met with those subgroups to develop the district that's a district PD plan. That's an error, I'm sorry. The district DSIP plan. And so the new template and the establishment of the chairs really created a great structure for this year and for very simplified progress monitoring. When you look at the form, we will simply be able to add a column to the right and at periodic times, usually mid-year, end of year, and identify where we are at that time in achieving each of those action steps in the DSIP. So I wanted to walk through each of the priorities. The very first priority, and you've heard this one for several years, and we continue to focus on it. It is a high leverage practice to really use your summative assessment data, your formative assessment data, and other supervisory data in terms of planning. This is such a key concept and it is worth continuing our tight attention to it. So we want to look at some of our structures and refine those. We want to review our data review cycle and guidance document, and then expand our data dashboards for very accessible data for the teachers and leaders. I meant to say for priority one, Frank Del Senor and Tricia Wolf co-chaired that committee. So I want to say thank you for them, to both of them, for that work. Priority two was chaired by Sarah McGraw and Lynn Strang. And this priority was focused very much on monitoring and modifying the elementary curriculum. This has been something that we've been trying to put a system in place for a while. And I just am going to step back for a minute, because I know I've been on the floor in the, with the curriculum review process and have spoken about the process. And I wanted the board to consider for a minute that if you are a 7th grade social studies teacher in our district, there are basically maybe 6 or 7 of you. And so when you are collaboratively creating curriculum and planning, you're working with a very small group. When you're talking about modifying the curriculum, you're talking about 5 to 7 people that are invested in that particular curriculum. At the elementary level, we might have 40 to 45 3rd grade teachers that in some way touch the curriculum. And so it becomes more complex to do that modification process. And so what we put in here really for the first time is a way to gather that. And that is to purposely and strategically in our CPT time and other opportunities to have work with our coaches and our instructional supervisors to regularly collect the teacher input around modifications that have just been made or that they see should be made in those spaces, so that we can adjust our curriculum as needed. So that's very exciting work. And I think, you know, you see that in these highlights that we have here: the equitable access to grade level standards, the PD for building leaders on everything that we're trying to do, but really that review of the data to inform curriculum implementation and unit by unit in order to make those changes. Priority 3 was chaired by Jen Houlihan and Elaine Greisler, with a focus on instructional practices, where we're implementing culturally responsive, equitable, high leverage instructional practices, K-12. And this particular plan has some wonderful highlights. Really, the monitoring the implementation of the instructional practices, that's one key thing. Really working on trying to get these full inquiry cycles into the walkthrough process, closing those loops. And I want the board to notice that really focusing on social justice and equity-based teaching in that process and having that lens. And one way to do that is to put student voice in the classroom to the forefront. So it's explicitly put in the DSIP, explicitly focus on student collaboration, and ensuring that all students have equitable access to grade level standards. This is a social justice issue. When our children come to us, we cannot say they are behind, so we need to start behind. We need to say these are the grade level standards, and we are going to find a way to dig down to what you need to access the grade level. And this has been ongoing in a very strong way in the last couple of years, but I would say that having this written articulation of this as a priority is really wonderful. I'm very proud of this work. And I want to thank board member Smith for participating in the committee and helping with this as well. Okay, priority 4. So we always have a social emotional dimension, but what we really drilled down to what our need was, and it's not tier 1. we have a tier 1 process. We have a PBIS plan. We have all those pieces in place. And the reviews have really showed that where our focus needs to be is on tier 2 and tier 3 behavioral interventions for that very small subgroup of students, that we need to find a way for them to access the academic program by managing any of the behavioral issues. This committee was chaired by Dr. Carrie Canzoni Ball. The goal is to reduce behavior referrals and suspensions through improved student identification, implementation, progress monitoring, and fidelity of tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. We really did see that we have those, but we didn't see those in action to the extent that we would like to see them. So they have plans for structures, PD, and regular data review. Priority 5 is the family engagement, and that was chaired by Michelle Bridgewater. We focused on increasing family engagement strategies and practices to improve the homeschool connection to support student success. Now, I know that you may have seen a similar priority in the past, but what I really love about the work that they did is they're talking about sort of having 2 simultaneous plans at once. We've always had in this one, it's really been about the communication plan, but we have never really had a family engagement plan. And there is a framework in the DTSDE process that will help us build that. Ms. Bridgewater will be leading that and really incorporating in that checklist for progress monitoring, the building implementation of how we are engaging our families. The communications plan focused on one-way and two-way communication, but I think even more key is the minimum requirements for communication from both the district and building level. And this was a really wonderful partnership between Mr. Lesko's office and the work that Michelle Bridgewater does for the district. She brought homeschool coordinators, community school coordinators in the subgroup, and they've really worked out a very nice action plan for the work for this priority. You may be asking, how are we building a DSIP in the world of COVID? We did build a plan that is as if life is normal. But then at the end of each of the different priority templates, you'll see that the state purposely provided us with a COVID-19 related challenges box, which gave the committees, the subcommittees, an opportunity to talk through what in their plan might need to be modified in order to continue the core work. And we talked about data collection in a virtual or blended environment and how that is likely going to be different. How we're going to do PD in a virtual environment, which I think this spring we got pretty good at. So I don't see a hard shift there. Our targets might change. So, for example, we did not have the NWEA spring administration. So what measures are we going to use? What targets are we going to use as we try to measure the work that we're doing? How are we going to improve our communication and family engagement strategies in the virtual environment? I know that you may or may not be aware of this, but were some teachers who actually set up Google Meets with their parents, and that they found that helped immensely in helping their students access the virtual program this last spring. So I think some of those kinds of strategies we could engage in. We are going to have more intense PD and instructional technology, and this is a bit of a teaser because when I'm back here in 2 weeks with the new 2-year district PD plan, you will see a robust instructional tech goal. So that's a little bit of a teaser for that. And then the walkthroughs in the virtual environment, we may need to negotiate that and have new training. What will that look like? How will that what will that supervision and support look like? How are we going to support our parents in a virtual environment? The elementary supervisors and principals really would like us to have a way to do some training with parents about how they can support their children if we are indeed in a virtual environment. And then we have to do an exploration of online assessment tools, which we are in the process of doing. So I believe that might be the end. Oh, our next steps. This document is due to NYSED by July 31st. We are well in line for getting it in on time, even though they offered us an extension. And implementation will begin this summer. We will continue to have the SAS group, which is really the directors and supervisors, which have a monthly meeting. They will be the progress monitoring body of the DSIP. And we have all the subcommittee chairs sit on that. So we will be able to progress monitor regularly and amend if so needed. And I think now I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bechtel. It is lovely to see this thing in Word where you can actually read all of the words. It's so great. I'm sure it made your life so much easier, just that piece of it. Plus, it's clear that the committee was really effective in the way they pulled together the goals and structured things. It's really very nice DSIP. Much improved. Thank you, New York State, for allowing a better process than has been previously in place. Board colleagues, as usual, we'll try and do one question at a time in case we need a second round. Who would like to go first? Ms. Smith.
Yes, Ms. Bechtel, thank you. And I just want to express a deep appreciation. I have, for the last, I think, 3 years or so, been a part of this process. And I'm sure in part it seemed to be much smoother because of the tool had changed. But I also just wanted to say kudos to all of the teachers and staff involved in this. I just really appreciated the dialogue and the thoughtfulness. I mean, it's always been there, but there was just something about the process this go round that seemed very different to me. And I really think it's because what we're all dealing with, and probably this particular priority 3 that I was working on, just hit home for so many of us. But I am just appreciative always of having a little bit of access and insight into the work that our teachers are doing on a regular, ongoing basis. So thank you for allowing me to participate in that.
And I think one reason, and normally don't jump in like this, but I do think one reason why it was a stronger process was having those chairs, because I would have this district committee. And what happened in this year is that they invited others in to participate as they needed them. And that really helped bolster the DSIP process and our final product.
Great, thank you.
Board colleagues, who has another question? Dr. Chittor.
I was looking at the membership of the committee, and I only saw one student and one parent, both from the high school. Do you think, we should think about having a parent or a student from the elementary level or the middle school level as well?
We were required to have this year students sit on the DSIP committee, but they're secondary students that are required, not elementary students.
But I'd be the parent from the elementary level.
Yeah, we invited 3 students and 3 parents to sit on the committee and had done our outreach as best as we could, principals, etc. Unfortunately, it turned out that only one high school student attended and one high school attended.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Bechtel, could you talk a little bit about that process? Because I feel like this is an issue every single year, trying to get people on the DSIP. And I know you all are very sensitive to making sure that we are sensitive to what my board colleague, Ms. Wilson, likes to call the progressive stack, and ensuring that we get voices from people who might not otherwise speak. And I really appreciate that that is the intent and the effort. But what it seems to be turning out every year is that we don't get any parent voice. And so I'm wondering if you could explain the process you're using, and if you're going to think about a different process for next year, because whatever we're doing, it doesn't actually seem to be working.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that we want to do is have this bank of parents that are available to participate in some of our things, like sort of do that initial outreach and have a group of parents that would be available to come on some of these committees that we have. That certainly was the intention. And, you know, I work with communications, I work with my colleagues and the principals to do the reach out. And we really did have some great people that were, you know, nominated to come. And I did my reach out. And I believe the principals did as well. And unfortunately, it's a little dry. And so it is hard to attract, you know, sometimes a little hard to attract people to this work, but I think, and then Anna, or I'm sorry, Ms. Savage, I will say that this year particularly, we were late. You know, we were a little later. I'm normally well into this back in April, and with our spring the way it was, we were a little bit later. So I did have every intention to do greater and better outreach, but I think those various things conspired against us.
I understand there were many things conspiring against us this year, unfortunately, in many ways. So it's totally understandable. I do feel like it's something that we just have to find another way
Yes.
to get
Agreed.
parent input with the DSIP. We have to. Board colleagues, who has a question or comment? Dr. Chatur, you have another question?
Yes, I do. So I think it was in the draft document that when I was looking through it, it talked about common planning time, and that was identified as one of the challenges that, you know, a little over 50% of the teachers actually participated in common planning time. And that was one of the things that we were going to improve by 10% to 66% or something like that. Could you tell me why are we finding this? Why are more people not participating right now? Like, what are the barriers for people to participate? Just because of the COVID situation, is it something bigger, and how are we addressing that?
I believe what you might be referring to, and I thought I had the document here, was some survey data about teachers working collaboratively.
Yes, I think that was it.
Right, and so that survey data comes from our survey that we conduct every year. This year it was in November, December. And that is really the teachers saying, and I think it was around that 56%, that they're collaborating 56% of the time. They are selfless, they are assessing themselves at that level. Now, do we have structures in place for CPT? Absolutely we do. That's in place in the school and the district. Please keep in mind, there are more opportunities at the secondary level for CPT than there is at elementary when that occurs only once a week. So some of that may have come from that. I also want to mention that I wonder if we asked that question to our teachers today, if it would be improved, because through the closure, the contact time that we had to meet with grade level teams and different teams and sort of plan the work, because it had to be a collective activity, because it was compelled to be. I wonder how much greater that the result of that question would be given the environment now.
Board colleagues, any other questions for Mrs. Bechtel? So in closing, I just want to say how pleased I am to see the D now really being a plan for the district and not being seen as a compliance document. When we started this 6 or 7 years ago, we really thought of it as a compliance document primarily. And now it feels much more that the district leadership is vested in having the plan be the right plan, and a plan that we can actually live up to and intend to live up to. And I think that's really a credit in part to all of the work you all have done, but also in part to the New York State Education Department making the DSIP process better over time. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
So that brings us almost to the end of the agenda. I did have a conversation with Board Member Smith earlier about having a brief report on Facilities Committee, since we had such a lengthy conversation about that last week, the last time we were together. So I would like to entertain a motion to amend the agenda to add a brief Facilities Committee report. Motion by Ms. Smith, seconded by Ms. Mann. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dr. Schur is voting against. You're not. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you so much. So Ms. Smith, I know that you guys did a lot of work in committee. We are not asking you to restate all that, but I think some of the process pieces would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, after the board meeting on the 29th, we did have a follow-up Facilities Committee meeting this past Tuesday, where we got into a little bit more, conversation about and follow up to the questions that were asked regarding our capital project. I just wanted to let the board know mainly of the process. We are still going through looking at cost savings, but I wanted to give you a sense of the process. Mr. Elmanyawe and Ms. Wilson, please feel free to jump in. And Ms. Roaring is standing by if there are any questions. So what we are going to do, we are waiting for the Facilities Committee a little bit more information from Ms. Roaring and the architect and the general contractor regarding some of the questions that were asked on the 29th and that are still remain from our Facilities Committee meeting. And we expect that information, I think by tomorrow. We will then have a fuller board update via the SBU on Sunday, by Sunday the 20th. All right. And what we'll do as our normal process is that board members will review that information and prepare to have their questions raised and submitted prior to that time. And prior to Monday, by Monday night of the 21st, I think that is. Let me get that right. I'm sorry. The 19th is by the 19th or before, you should receive the SBU. On that Monday, you should submit your questions. And you can do that directly to any one of the three of us on the Facilities Committee or through the communications tool. I would prefer, actually, if you would share that with the committee, then we know immediately. We will then meet as a Facilities Committee on the 21st at 5:30 for a further discussion. And we will make a recommendation at that point to the full board, to take action on the contracts and some other related matters on the 23rd, our full board meeting at that time. So I hope that's helpful. And we will be looking at just a brief public presentation to close the loop out at that time on the 23rd. Okay, does that make sense? Does that help? And Ms. Roaring, feel free to jump in.
I think you did a really good job summarizing that process over the next 10 days or so.
Okay.
So we are feverishly working and pressing a number of individuals to give us the information that we need and get the contracts ready to our attorney, reviewed, and in the board's hands by the end of next week. So
absolutely. That's great. Thank you, Ms. Roaring. So, and I have already laid those steps for you all in an email. So much more articulate and on point, but generally that's the process. And feel free at any point in time to ask questions of any of the three committee members or to pose your questions to us. Any information that comes to us in advance of the SBU, we will also be happy to share that out with you for your input as well.
I guess I just want to extend that invitation also to the members of the public who are listening, that the Facilities Committee meeting, like all of our meetings, is an open meeting, and you are welcome to participate and listen in, and also welcome to send questions to board members in advance of the meeting so that they can ask those questions. Because we do anticipate that the bulk of the work on now nailing down these last decisions about Albany High is going to be made in the Facilities Committee, where it ought to be made, and that the board on the 23rd will anticipate a strong recommendation from the facilities committee that we are ready to go. And if that's not where we're at the end of the facilities committee meeting, then we'll be in a very different place. But that's fully what I anticipate happening.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else on facilities? Then I know you would like to all hear the magic words, but we are not going to have magic words. We are going to have entertaining a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to the evaluation of a particular person. A motion by Dr. Chatoris, second by Ms. Krejci. All in favor? That's unanimous. Members of the public who might still be holding out on this beautiful summer evening, we do not anticipate returning to public session tonight. We expect to be in executive session and then immediately adjourn the meeting as we leave executive session. Have a good evening, members of the public. We will see you on the 23rd.